And good morning, everybody. This is Todd Nilson with Catalyzing the Future. And today, why we need to start thinking about online communities as living systems, the artificial boxes we create, how digital spaces support imaginal cells, and the principles of regenerative culture, all in the very first episode here of Building Resilient Online Communities. Welcome back to Catalyzing the Future and our newest series called Building Resilient Online Communities. My name is Todd Nilson, and I work as the owner of Clocktower Advisors, a digital strategy consultancy, which is a sponsor for this event, for this ongoing series. The question of why resiliency? Well, since the crisis of 2020, the multiple crises of 2020, the mission of Catalyzing the Future has been to challenge conventional thinking and to build more sustainable ways of thinking and doing in the future. Our guests might call them regenerative futures, and we'll get into that in a moment. And why online communities? Well, because with more emphasis on remote work, with the greater need for collaboration on a global basis, online communities are really poised to take on a far more central role from multiple perspectives. And so this series is going to explore the role of online communities and hopefully give people some more ideas for how to apply them within their organizations, in their communities, in their live communities, and wherever there's a need for collaboration and connecting people. Before we start, please remember to like this video and to subscribe and press the bell button below so that you don't miss any of our future installments. We have some great other guests that are coming up as well. And with that, let me go ahead and it's my great pleasure to introduce Sahana Chattopadhyay. She is a speaker, a writer, a facilitator, and a catalyst. Sahana is a storyteller who thinks and writes extensively about regenerative futures. And today we're going to talk about ways you can use online communities to reinvent your organization as a living system. Welcome, Sahana. I'm so honored that you could join us today.
Thank you, Todd. Thank you for setting this up, for creating this space for generative conversations. And I think that's a great way to start. And wishing you all the best for the series. And thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you so much. I wanted you as my first guest for this. We met back last September, I believe, when we were doing the Catalyzing the Future event. And I was struck by how we were some of the few people that were on that event that had actually been active in online communities and had some passion for their potential and what they could do. And I think at the time we said, we should try to figure out some way to collaborate or have some further conversations. And then as I read some of your work in Age of Emergence and your blog and on Medium, I think what I was most struck by was you hadn't just simply thought deeply about the technology in the space, but that you bring real spirit and poetry to thinking about how we're using our technologies today. And so I thought, wow, what better way to start a series about being more resilient, in using these technologies than to come with somebody who's thought about them with such soul and such care. So there was no other choice for me to begin the series. Could you maybe start by telling a little bit about your history with online communities, how you got started or involved with that space?
Sure. So in the course of my corporate career of about 18 plus years, one of the roles I played in one of multinational organizations is that of an online community manager. And this was more than a decade ago, almost like 12 years ago. And that was when it was just, Twitter had just come in 2008, and I had kind of started exploring Twitter, posting. I mean, I didn't even know what it was. I still remember one of my perhaps silliest tweets I sent out to Jay Cross, an eminent name who coined the term e-learning, saying, "Are you the Jay Cross who wrote the book?" And he was like, "I'm very much the Jay Cross." Because I didn't know what Twitter was about and that he was really going to be responding. And then I think what struck me and what really wowed me was the fact that an online technological platform via internet suddenly brought me into a community of global learning and development and organizational design um, experts. I kind of hesitate to use the word experts. I'm not very fond of the word, but brought me into this community of like thought leaders, thinkers, passionate people who were talking about organizational design, learning, communities, peer-to-peer learning, collaborative learning, social learning, modern workplace learning, and names like Harold Jarkey and Jane Hart, Rachel Happy. They were literally my philosophers, friends, guides in this whole space. And as I sort of started building my own community, and that's when I started blogging also, because I just saw others doing it. And I was like, hey, I can also join this conversation. Why not? Let me give it a shot. And so technology, intersection of technology, people, passion, a kind of a co-learning, co-creative environment really triggered my passion in how online platforms can become facilitators of creating a culture of learning in organizations and a culture of ongoing learning, and not learning because someone is telling you to, which doesn't work well with adults, not learning because there's a sage on the stage kind of, training you on X, Y, Z, which might be required at times, but that's not how adults again like to learn. But learning because you're driven by passionate people surrounding you, and you become a part of that, that energy, that group, that cohort, that community learning together. And that's how I think the more I wrote, I also, because of my writing, my articles, and my exploration, I landed a job as an online community manager. And those were like the early days of Yammer and Chatter and Social Text and Jive. And the online platforms were just being used by organizations who were like mostly multinational organizations, IT organizations, investing in enterprise social network platforms like these to become social businesses, to reach out to create a kind of an ecosystem of stakeholders, customers, internal employees. And that was, I was at that absolute cusp of that work, helping this organization, which was spread across the globe, right from Chicago to China, from Latin America to West Indies, everywhere, and I literally traveled the globe also, helping that organization use this online platform for learning, for collaboration, for contextual conversations, for asynchronous sharing, and suddenly that whole, how should I say, the whole possibilities and potential of an online community that can be facilitated, that can be stewarded, really made me passionate about the power of the space. And so I obviously dived into Peter Block, dived more into work by Otto Scharmer, by Rachel Happy. I became part of the community roundtable, and so the whole thing just sort of became one of my driving passions in how organizations can shift from a top-down training culture to an ongoing culture of continuous learning, collaboration, co-creation, sharing, and just more transparency, more authenticity. So yeah, that's the context.
There are so many things I love about what you said right there. Particularly, I think from the ways that we first experience online community and first understand the power of that, it's actually addictive, isn't it? To suddenly feel connected to those other individuals that are so geographically far from you, maybe, and to realize that you can engage and have conversations with people who are. If you, as you said, you may be uncomfortable with the term experts, but people who are thinking deeply and care deeply about a particular topic, and they keep coming back to that. My early experiences weren't in the professional space with online communities, but with gaming communities, and so I had come at it from people who were, like, I think passion is at the center of that. If you ever have been on a discussion forum of a bunch of gamers, they're, if nothing else, they are super passionate about what they do and what they care about, and I think to suddenly feel a part of that, it really is. I love your term, a living system. So much of that is it feels like a living thing, and so real. If I could, I just want to read something that you had written that was so beautiful, describing this. You had written, when we perceive organizations as living systems, we stop using control to enforce order. We understand that, like all living systems, organizations have inherent resilience and congruence. It is only when we disturb the natural flow of relationships, of meaning making, of authentic contribution and collaboration by creating artificial boxes, silos, and hierarchy that we create disharmony, disbalance, and disorder. I mean, if I had to encapsulate what I want to do with this series, I mean, you've really boiled it down into those words. How did you end up coming up with the idea of the living system as just a choice of words? What did that mean to you?
Great question. I think I need to perhaps wind back a bit. And so right from childhood, I've been passionate. I mean, not love nature, like I've been passionate about nature. At one point, I wanted to be like a zookeeper. I grew up on Gerald Durrell and James Herriot, and so I literally wanted to live with animals. And then as I grew older, that didn't work out. So as I grew older, I wanted to be a vet, and then I wanted to be, at least if nothing else, a naturalist. And I have trained as a naturalist. And one of the things I have discovered is about myself is I'm really at my, inwardly, I'm at my thriving best when I'm in a forest, when I'm surrounded by nature, by mountains, by forests, by rivers, by oceans, but more mountains and forests. And so that was one side of it. Then, of course, as I was exploring, after I left the corporate space, as I was exploring how organizations can be different, can operate differently, and of course influenced and inspired by books by Frederick Laloux, Reinventing Organizations, Designing Regenerative Cultures by Daniel Wall, Biomimicry by I keep forgetting it. But the book and that whole gamut of and of course the science, complexity science, the science of complex adaptive systems. All of it sort of kind of started coming together, and I started seeing and sensing, rather, not seeing, but knowing at a deeper level beyond cognitive that organizations are living systems. They are ecosystems. And if they have rigid boundaries and boxes and silos and hierarchies and control, they might scale efficiency, productivity, whatever, up to a point. After that, they are going to degenerate. And they are going to not only degenerate and die, but they are going to bring the people within also. So it's almost like it starts to, the organization then starts to, I don't know how to say it, but suppress and become a system of suppression and oppression. If it is a closed hierarchical command and control system that only focuses on planning and efficiency and productivity. The more I thought about it, I started diagramming, I started researching, I started writing. I realized there were people who had spoken about organizations as living systems, Norman Wolfe being one of them. And then the more I thought about it and about communities in parallel, they seemed to me to be ecosystems which will thrive if they have porous boundaries, if they can interact with their environment in a thrivable, resilient, anti-fragile manner, if it is not so tightly controlled but instead allowed to flourish, and the relationships are allowed to grow and thrive in an atmosphere of gentle nurturing, stewardship, and authenticity, then an organization can truly thrive, can truly become a regenerative business in the true sense of the word. What that means for me is that not only an organization thriving, but its ecosystem thriving, everyone within it thriving. So it becomes a sort of it's like I use the analogy of a rainforest, which is so myriad, which is so diverse, and in all its diversity, it thrives. But when you turn that into into a monoculture, when you try to control it, when you try to weed everything out, and you try to impose order on it, that's when it starts to, after a point, fail. And that's what we are seeing in our current organizations. So much order has been imposed that the structures are now collapsing. The flexibility is gone, the resilience is gone. And the more people struggle to hold on to that structure and imposed control, the more it's going to give way and collapse. But the more loosely you hold it in the spirit of stewardship and in the spirit of nurturing, then it's going to thrive. So, yeah. So for me, it's a porous ecosystem.
It's a difficult concept for some organizations to accept. As I've worked with many dozens of organizations now over the years since I've been working in online communities, I regularly run into leaders in these organizations that are so worried about control. They're so concerned about what if somebody says something that we're not comfortable with, right? They're sort of worried about these edge cases of difficulty. And in my experience, and tell me if this rings true with you, I think most people are respectful of the boundaries of employer-employee relationships. They're respectful of each other in those places. There's only some cases in maybe open communities, with customers where they're angry about something or someone's had a bad day, or in some cases there's a mental wellness issue, that's there, where some rules have to be enforced. But there is some discomfort with the organicism of, if that's a word, of online communities and what they represent, as opposed to so many other kinds of software or technologies that don't allow interaction of any sort. They're difficult for companies to embrace.
Yes, absolutely, Todd. And I think there are a couple of things, that, as you said, 3-4 things. See, one of the reasons I feel that today the leaders, and it has always been the case, are scared to give up control is because of the way leadership has been defined for the last, I don't know, maybe like seven decades. Ever since the industrial era of control and mechanization, leadership has been defined, or rather, successful leadership has been defined as someone who gets things done, who can make people productive, who can make resources optimize, who can, so look at the words: efficiency, productivity, optimization, engineering. Where is regeneration in all of this? It's almost as if we are just constantly oiling a machine with different parts that need to be fiddled around with, and that's it. Things will work. And that whole model of leadership from which today's leaders arise have made people, or rather leaders, fearful of the fluidity, agility, the looseness, the flexibility of giving up control and just being. They've forgotten what it is to be and what it is to let go of control. And the other interlinked aspect is, of course, the myth of human centrality, that human beings are in charge and we can control everything, including nature and this planet. And of course, we know where that has brought us. The third aspect of this is what you said, that apart from a few exceptional cases, people do respect boundaries. So boundaries are set and I'm going to sort of refer to Brené Brown, who has this beautiful book on how to braving the wilderness, on how to set boundaries. The most compassionate people have strong boundaries, because I cannot be compassionate without setting clear boundaries. So it is up to the leaders to set clear boundaries, but that does not mean, and also the employees. So the relationships, good relationships, are also based on strong boundaries of respect, of authenticity, of wholeness, of giving space to each other, holding space for each other. And where I think today's leaders who have come with this notion of I need to be in control, I need to be the expert, I must have all the answers, I'm the problem solver around here. And if I don't know, and if I say I don't know, then that's it. I'm going to be wiped out as a leader. Is because of the whole cultural myth of leader as expert, as controller, as the commander in charge. And that myth has to be dismantled, has to be deconstructed, because it is a myth, human constructed, for a certain period in our human history, when it might have served its purpose, but not very well. And today, it's definitely not going to serve any purpose at all, except maybe create some negativity, a lot of negativity. What we need leaders to do today is to befriend uncertainty, be with uncertainty, be with questions, and be vulnerable and yet brave enough to say, hey, it's too complex, I don't know, let's go and do it together.
It's tremendously, I think, sort of leaders worry about that, letting go of that control and embracing, uncertainty and admitting that they don't know about things. But I think there's a certain element of our culture where that's perceived as a weakness, as opposed to a strength. I think it's a matter of getting back to leading with humility, and recognizing we don't have those answers. And it's something that I was having a conversation online with Sayal here last week about leaders and followers. Somebody had posted up on a LinkedIn feed a Simon Sinek quote about sort of be the leader that you wanted to have as your leader, and no knock on Simon Sinek. I think he has some fine thinking, but I think Sai pointed out that there's a toxicity between that dichotomy of leader and follower, and it's not just bad for followers who maybe have a bad leader, but it's bad for leaders, because isn't it awfully stressful to feel like you're the person that's always got to offer the answer to everything, right? And what he was proposing, more so was that idea of situational leadership, where we're stronger as an organization if we let the person lead who knows the most about that particular situation or moment or challenge in time. And I feel like maybe that's what you're describing when you're talking about these living systems, that they're adaptive because they have a group of people with many different talents and many different perspectives, and maybe bringing those to bear, at the right time, is the key to being more successful as an organization in these uncertain times in which we live.
And I think what you brought up, Todd, is a very, very important, again, a cultural myth of dualism. This whole thing of leader and follower, and any other kind of dualism, the dualistic thinking that we have, has landed us into this mess in the first place, us versus nature. So now nature is, we are not nature, but it's out there somewhere for us to do something with. So leader is not a follower, and followers are going to follow someone who they think is a leader. So all of those are very problematic, because it puts tremendous pressure on one person, whoever the poor person is. And second, what it does is it creates this notion that some people have leadership qualities and some don't. Mm-hmm. And again, that whole notion of leadership qualities is problematic, because we are defining leadership qualities by the cultural myths that have been prevalent for a long time, which is no longer serving us. Like you said, the fear of saying, I don't know, the fear of being seen as a failure, the fear of being seen as weak, the fear of being seen as, oh, I'm not aggressive enough, assertive enough, competitive enough, productive enough. And all of those are actually coming from a very deep-seated inferiority, kind of deep-seated angst, and a kind of a scarcity-driven mindset. If we, if generations of leaders, say for example, had been brought up with the notion of organizations as living systems. Now, if you see a living system, an oak doesn't necessarily beat his chest or her chest or its chest just because the fern next to it is tiny. The fern has the fern's purpose, the oak has the oak's purpose. And everyone is who they are supposed to be. And exactly who they're supposed to be without wanting to be somebody or something or someone else. And I think if each one of us, and this is from Parker Palmer, that our hidden wholeness could be appreciated, that hidden wholeness of each individual, and each one of us had that opportunity, I think leaders would be all the more better for it. They would not only be better human beings, but better leaders, and they would know how to steward and nurture their people and the organization. Just as, I mean, if I'm going to, I don't have to chop someone down to make someone else feel better in a forest. But in organizations, that's constantly happening. You have to make someone look small to make someone else look big. So how does those dualities exist? And we, or rather, when they exist, we are moving away from all that is regenerative, flourishing, thriving, and resilient. We are moving into a space of scarcity, degeneration, decay, and obsolescence.
I love that phrase, hidden wholeness, of, you know, just the untapped potentials of people. I think of sort of the iceberg metaphor. We have sort of what we see above the surface, but there's so much more below that you know, could be goodness that just hasn't been visible in an organization or been possible. I was hoping to turn that conversation a little bit now to sort of the digital or the technology, you know, side of things. So we've talked a bit about sort of these living systems in the abstract, or you know, as you know, organizations as a whole. How do these technologies that are intermediaries for us now, like there's a layer between you and I talking through the ether right now. How do the asynchronous conversations you alluded to earlier in a discussion forum or on a social stream, you know, in a community, how do these digital spaces support the imaginal selves you were talking about, or how do they bring out the hidden wholeness of people, or can they?
Yes, indeed. And I think much more powerfully than they are given credit for. And I'm saying this from experience, a personal experience. See what happens in digital spaces, and I'm saying digital spaces, where these digital spaces are facilitators, like you said, intermediaries of connection and building of relationships and collaboration. So they are kind of facilitating the process. They are not the purpose. So organizations go off track when they make digital the purpose and not digital the facilitator. Okay. And that's a different topic altogether.
That's so powerful. Absolutely.
Facilitator.
Yes.
Technology as purpose and end goal creates dystopia. So we land up in techno-fantasy and often in techno-lunacy and surveillance capitalism and all kinds of stuff. But when you see technology as facilitator, as intermediary, as a kind of a medium, helping us to become the best that we can be, supporting our emergent and emerging selves, that I think is the power of technology. And in online communities, that can happen because if you imagine, say, an organization that is globally spread in, let's imagine, say, globally spread across 15 different locations. And you have an online community which all the employees can use across different groups and on the platform. Now the platform becomes a porous container connecting all of these people together from the mainstream of the organization. Now, when I say mainstream, all organizations have centers, core, and fringes, all organizations. But what a platform does is it brings the fringes, the voices on the peripheries, which normally would not get heard, into the platform. And especially for, say, people like me who are deeply introverted, an online platform is a godsend.
That's so true. Absolutely.
I mean, I love to write. That's why I've taken to writing, I guess, because I am so introverted. But put me in a social party and I'm really found sitting next to against a wall and I want to vanish into space. But having said that, so online platforms have this power to us. People can participate voluntarily in a way that enables them, empowers them, provided, of course, the culture of the organization is also enabling and empowering. If you have an organization that controls what you say, then nothing is going to happen. I'm not even talking of such organizations. I'm talking of organizations where openness and trust and authenticity are welcome. And in that kind of an environment, you hear from people who you suddenly realize are the voices of the organization's future, are the voices that will make this organization resilient, make this organization thrivable. And those are what I call the imaginal selves hiding in every organization. And it's a leader's job, truly a leader's job, is to spot those imaginal selves, nurture those imaginal cells, and not let them get drowned and crowded out by what is happening at the core. Because the core of the organization, focused on profit and whatever else, is always going to deny space to these voices. A leader will nurture them till the time is ready and the soil is ready, if I may use that metaphor, for those voices to come to the center and the organization to transform and evolve to its next stage of evolution. So yes, I think online communities can be a very powerful container crucible for such conversations and for such transformative changes, if nurtured, if held.
I love that so much. I'm probably going to get this wrong, but there's a book that my wife and I read recently. I think it was called The Understory. And it was about sort of these eco protesters, but it was really kind of about a story of nature and trees, and some of the people whose lives were impacted in various ways about it. But I think one of the powerful metaphors or things that was underlying the story was this idea that if you had sort of this big redwood tree, this big central tree, that it in many ways fed and communicated with all of the trees that were around it. That it was almost sort of an eco internet, if you will. Yeah. And I mean, what you described and sort of what you were talking about with that living system, it requires that we be connected somehow, even though these trees are very far apart from each other in some cases. What I think a lot of the science is showing is that they actually do have connections through their root systems, under the soil, through the rhizomes and the fungi that's actually how they're exchanging information and nutrients with each other. And I think more and more about online communities sort of in that way, and that's why I loved living systems, the way that you described that, and the way that you just described it now was that idea of interaction. And requiring that safety, in between it. It's almost as if humans decided, well, we need to make sure that these trees survive, so we're going to put all these fertilizers and artificial things in the soil, which actually kills the connection between things. It reminds me of a line from Wordsworth. We murder to dissect, right? that we tear things apart to understand them, but in doing so, we actually ruin the wonderful organicism of them in the process. So I wonder this. So maybe if we could kind of wrap this up in terms of your idea of regenerative culture, regenerative leadership. If an organization has been in this hierarchical command and control kind of mindset, for some time, but they like this idea of enabling their employees or enabling their customers with some kind of online community. What do they need to examine first? Like, how do they start that process of change? What is the catalyst that will get them maybe thinking in a slightly different way? How would you advise them?
Again, a great question, Tom, and I've thought about it a lot. So one of the things, again, from my many failures that I've learned, is an organization or a team or an individual or a leader, and I'm using leader in a very broad sense here. Everyone is a leader depending on when and how and where she or he finds themselves. First of all, they need to see that the way things are right now is not the way it should be.
Mm-hmm.
Only when you sense that deep within you, it's a little like I would say the Pilgrims Journey more than the hero's journey. It's a tough path. And I'm saying that very clearly up front.
And I'm sorry,
It's not easy.
Whose journey? I didn't quite catch.
The Pilgrim's Journey.
The Pilgrim's Journey. Oh, thank you. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm not saying the hero's journey very deliberately. The hero's journey has this one person who goes through, and it's commendable, but there are challenges that again seep back into the cultural story. The Pilgrim's Journey, on the other hand, is one that starts in humility, knowing that what is happening or what am I and the organization is right now is not what it can be, and it can be different. And that journey is tough. It's tough, and I'm saying this like not to warn people away, but to make it very clear that you have to go, like David White says, beyond yourself constantly to be on this journey. I love David White. I love his poem, Beyond Yourself.
He's wonderful. Yes, I love David White.
I love it. Just beyond yourself. So every time you have to go beyond yourself to be on this path. And what does this path entail? Again, seeing organizations as potentials and believing in that potential of humans and all sentient beings, not only humans, and unyielding faith in the potential of the organization, its evolutionary purpose, all the people, and the ecosystem, coming from a place of abundance, not scarcity, coming from of humility, but with courage. When I say humility with courage, and I kind of call this this radical compassion, that be fierce with yourself, with everyone else, but holds the space with radical compassion. And what I mean by that is when leaders so it's not something I can explain, say maybe in 2 sentences, but what I'm saying is when we try to move towards a regenerative future, we have to deconstruct and hospice a lot of the ways of doing things that we are used to, accustomed to. Deconstruct that and see from that the seeds of what is working and hold those seeds, nurture those seeds, and then create space for those, the healthy seeds to sprout, to come to fruition, to become, so literally midwife the new culture, step by step. And this will mean a lot of things, letting go of the control, letting go of hierarchy, staying with uncertainty, staying with difficult questions, learning to ask questions without knowing the answer, learning to trust that somewhere in this wisdom of the collective, the answer resides. It doesn't have to be in me or you or anyone else as a leader, quote unquote again. So I think it's a combination of these mind shifts, paradigm shifts, and leadership shifts how we learn. So shifting all of those paradigms little by little through democratic processes, using maybe simple processes like liberating structures, which allows you to tap into the collective wisdom of the people. In day-to-day processes like meetings, how can you use liberating structures in meetings to hear everyone's voice, to hear the unheard, unseen, and acknowledged voices? There are some voices which are always unseen and unheard, and they are usually the most powerful voices. So I would say, drawing on all of these different aspects, bringing them, practicing that, and it's a journey. It's a long journey, but tough journey, and something that you must be willing to undertake. Like a pilgrim can't be told. The pilgrim needs to feel that he or she must go on this journey. That's how I see it.
Sahana, there's so much wonderful wisdom in all of that you just said, and I am charmed by the idea of the Pilgrim's Journey. I hadn't thought of it in contrast to the hero's journey, to be honest. But I immediately can see the better utility of that metaphor for what you're describing, and the more team-oriented view of that as well. It's the difference between, man, I could spend another hour or two with you talking about that. But that idea of sort of the hero's journey, the hero is always reluctant to begin. They're not self-reflective. They've had this moment of shock, where something terrible happened, and then they go, on their own, maybe with a guide, and end up at this place of, the abyss where they're facing off, into their darkest self or whatever that is. But the Pilgrim's Journey, as you said, it begins with that humility and self-reflection and the realization that you need to be something better and do something better. It's beginning with that seed of knowledge. And I love that. And I immediately, because I'm a literature guy, I started thinking about the Canterbury Tales and sort of, how they become stronger as a group by telling their stories to each other and by recognizing the strengths of each other, and that the wisdom is along the way of that journey. It wasn't even necessarily the destination that they were going to, but it was that they were united in purpose, and sharing stories and sharing wisdom with each other through that. I mean, you've brought me great joy in bringing that up.
Thank you. And that's the last point. And I think what happens in the Pilgrim's Journey, and Chaucer knew it, is the journey becomes the learning, the transformation. And coming from India, where everyone goes on pilgrimages are always undertaken in groups.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's this corollary with groups and teams and organizations going on this deliberate, reflective journey of transformation, knowing that it will be difficult, knowing they'll face challenges, knowing there will be, the valley of darkness, the valley of light, if I were to refer to the different literatures. I'm a literature person as well. So knowing all of that, that's where that overarching narrative then gives people that anchor to stay on that evolutionary purpose.
Sahana, I am honored to be a pilgrim on this journey with you. Thank you so much for being my first guest on this series. And I think you've given me and any of our viewers who view this in the playback a great deal to think about. And
Thank you.
if someone's interested in following your work or learning a little bit more about you, I know you have a Medium blog, and I believe I've linked to that. I've linked to your LinkedIn profile as well. I don't know if there's anywhere else where they should be looking or connecting with you, or if somebody wants to engage you as a speaker anywhere.
Thank you. So yeah, I can be reached on LinkedIn. You can DM me on Twitter. I can be reached via email. And very shortly, I'm going to launch my website, maybe in another couple of weeks, and I'll definitely share the link with you. So I can be reached through different platforms, and I'm available on any of these platforms.
Well, that's absolutely wonderful, Sahana. Thank you so much. Sincerely, this has been a wonderful conversation, and so much golden treasure that you've offered
Thank
us
you,
here
Todd.
today.
Thank you for creating and holding this space. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And that's it for our first episode of Building Resilient Online Communities. I hope you'll tune in next time. We have another interview coming up in a couple of weeks with Nick O'Brien, who is a local community builder and entrepreneur, actually from my neck of the woods, Wisconsin, and here in the United States. And we'll be talking about the connection between local and online communities, how hybrids can make us stronger in our interactions, in our creativity, and what he's done to promote his local entrepreneurs network. I can actually say entrepreneurs, his entrepreneurs network with others. So please, if you haven't already, please click the bell below and get notified of our next scheduled event. And until then, we will see you online.